Chair calls up Senate Bill 784 and recognizes its author, Senator Hughes, to explain his bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, thank you and your team for working with us to schedule and hear the bill. Members, Senate Bill 784 has to do with human sexuality instruction offered by school districts. Under current law, Section 28.004 of the Education Code deals with local school health advisory councils and health education, and it directs school boards to establish an advisory council to assist the district in formulating its health education curriculum. Under current law, the board must consider the advice of the School Health Advisory Council when selecting curriculum related to human sexuality and certain related topics. The notice and participation provisions related to the adoption of human sexuality instruction can be strengthened, and that's the goal of Senate Bill 784. It's about notice and participation by parents, and that's what the bill's about. And we do have a committee substitute.
All right. This time, Senator Hughes sends up committee substitute to Senate Bill 784, and you recognize to explain the differences.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The originally filed bill would have required the Commissioner of Education to determine if a particular human sexuality curriculum comply, with state law. And that's been removed. What we have before you requires that that provision is removed, and now the emphasis is put on the existing infrastructure with local school board and the Health Advisory Council. It requires that each member of the School Health Advisory Council be appointed by the school board. It requires minutes of the School Health Advisory Council be posted on the website. It requires each school board to implement a policy regarding the adoption of human sexuality curriculum, enhances the notice provisions for parents, requires districts to make the entire curriculum available online and by mail or email to parents who request it. And it places the School Health Advisory Council under the Open Meetings Law and Public Information Law. And that's actually, we borrowed that from Senator Paxton, Senate Bill 1854. We hope both of these measures pass. Senate Bill 794 would do a lot to increase transparency and parent participation in the formulation of important health education curriculum. We believe this is important. We heard from parents across the state about even though Texas law requires this information to be made available, instead often it's only vague summaries that parents see or are aware of. Also, many parents express concern about whether the material is age appropriate, and even in the media there have been reports about some more aggressive material with younger and younger children. Because it's so sensitive, Texas law has long recognized parents should be involved. Senate Bill 784, in particular the committee substitute, seeks to give that more effect. And that's what the bill would do, and I humbly offer it to the committee.
All right.
Mr. Chairman.
Sir West.
Committee substitute E2 on page 3.
Yes, sir.
What would be the scope of the Commissioner's authority on line 3 through 8? What's the scope of the Commissioner's authority? Should adopt rules?
Yes, sir. Because, as you know, it's common for the Commissioner and TEA to give rules and guidelines for local school districts. And like any bill we pass, we often say the agency shall develop rules to implement, and that's the idea here. So the the Commissioner would adopt curriculum, would adopt rules for the districts to use and the health advisory councils to use in implementing this section.
What would be, going back to your original bill on page 1 under H1, what would be the difference in the authority of the Commissioner under the committee substitute on H1?
In the originally filed bill, the Commissioner would have had the responsibility and authority to approve the curriculum. That is not before us. That has been completely removed in the committee substitute. I would say that's fundamentally the difference in the Commissioner's role between the original filed bill and the committee substitute.
Okay, so you're saying that the intent of the committee substitute is to allow the school board to make that determination, approve that curriculum, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And also to implement the transparency provisions in the process.
Okay. As it relates to the process for adopting the curriculum in the committee substitute, what is the process for adopting curriculum? What does that mean?
So essentially, as you'll notice, the bill does not limit what can or cannot be taught, what can or cannot be offered. The bill is only saying the process that's being used to develop the curriculum and to choose it, let's make that more transparent. So nothing in the bill nothing in the bill would limit the district's ability to develop and choose curriculum. Now, current Texas law speaks to that, and Senate Bill 794 originally and as substituted does not seek to change that. It's only about letting parents be involved, make sure they know what's going on. So there's no attempt here to limit the district's ability to adopt the curriculum that they deem appropriate.
And the commissioner under the committee substitute would not have that power or authority?
No, sir. His authority would be to put rules in place on what that transparency looks like, but not limit their authority to adopt curriculum.
And so we just include parents in this process?
That's the crux of the bill. Thank you, Senator. That's exactly right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? All right. This time we'll open up public testimony. We'll invite Lori Kirkendall, Deborah Simmons, Melissa Beckett, and Sharon Armke. Are you Lori?
Yes, sir.
Was it Kirkendall?
Yes, sir.
Just the way we pronounce it in Houston?
Yes, sir.
All right.
No R, but you say one.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. My name is Lori Kirkendall. I serve as the Executive Director of Aim for Success. We are a nonprofit health education organization celebrating 25 years serving Texas schools. We are the largest provider of live health education programs in the state. We provide research-based, medically accurate, age-appropriate sexuality and abstinence instruction that is compliant with the Texas Education Code and the TEKS for students in grade 5 through 12. We serve about 80 districts across the state, all sizes, including several large districts like Abilene, Alief, Corpus Christi, and Frisco. We work with many school health advisory councils, and I've seen the need to clarify the role of and strengthen the effectiveness of SHACs and ensure that they are compliant with their original intent. I've seen many SHACs that do not comply with the requirement that the majority of members are parents not employed by the district. Some are comprised of only a few district employees. Parents are key to reinforcing the information and values shared in school. SHACs are often not representative of the community, either because they have too few members or worse, members who are not appointed by the elected school board. Recently, one of the state's largest districts passed a radical change to implement a non-education code compliant curriculum where less than 25%, far less than the quorum, of the board-approved SHAC members were present for the vote. School district administrators moved hastily through the process and meetings closed to the public and did not allow sufficient communication or time for public, parent, SHAC, or even school board member notice, review, and input. I'm hopeful that this bill will allow SHACs to better serve their communities and promote the optimal health of all students and will provide a means of ensuring compliance in all districts. Thank you.
All right. Questions, members? Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Deborah?
Yes. My name is Deborah Simmons. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in favor of Senate Bill 784. I served on the Round Rock ISD School Health Advisory Council, also known as the SHAC, as legislated by Education Code 28004. School board trustees in every district are required to establish a SHAC and appoint at least 5 members to the citizen committee. The majority of members must be parents of students in the district. The SHAC must provide advice to the district on coordinated school health programming and assist the district in ensuring that local community values are reflected in the health curriculum. In 2012, Round Rock ISD parents discovered that whoever showed up at the SHAC meetings in the spring were granted membership, could create and vote on recommendations. Trustees are elected by the voters. Trustees must review recommendations from the SHAC to determine the instruction, but who decides who is on the SHAC? Other than the required 5 trustee-appointed members. Each district is different. A few districts have the trustees appoint all members, but generally district employees choose the members, or districts allow whoever shows up at the meetings to join committees, make recommendations, and vote, just as they did in Round Rock. If the district employees choose the SHAC members and the trustees rubber stamp approve the list, then does that count as appointing? Districts must provide written notice of instruction and provide materials for reasonable public inspection. Written notice is often buried in the handbook. with language out of the education code, but very little details on the curriculum taught in that specific school district. Even after searching the school district website, reading the handbook, and reviewing the parental notification forms, it is almost impossible to know the actual contents of the curriculum. I was closely supervised as I reviewed the health textbook in my district's warehouse. What should be considered reasonable public inspection when complying with Texas Education Code? What are they trying to hide, and where is that transparency they would expect? Please support bill language to improve district transparency and accountability and pass this bill. Thank you.
I'm sorry, when you say you were closely supervised, when you were looking at it, what were they thinking you might do if you're by yourself?
No idea.
I mean, that's,
Yeah.
I mean, they were so worried about a parent seeing it that it was like a,
And this was just a textbook.
and the child can't bring the textbook home.
No, and this was in the warehouse.
Do they take the students to the warehouse to look at the textbook, or they bring it to the classroom?
I did ask them about the textbooks that were in the warehouse and why they weren't in the classrooms being utilized, and they did say that the textbooks generally weren't utilized.
So,
Sir West?
that's a whole nother
Yeah.
question.
I know.
Well, that's the whole
I didn't-
instructional materials a lot more. You're buying textbooks because you had to buy them to spend the money, because if you didn't spend the money, it was,
And you leave them, and you leave
Yeah.
them.
And they were sitting in the warehouse,
Yeah.
yes.
Somebody got rich, right?
so
I
similar.
walked through a large warehouse full of textbooks, but I was just interested in looking at the one. I was seated at a table, and she monitored me as I...
She monitored you while
I
you
mean,
were,
she
as a
sat
parent, looking at.
as I was looking through the textbook.
Okay, thank you. I'm just interesting. Any other questions? Melissa?
Yes. Hi, my name is Melissa Beckett. I live in San Antonio, Texas. My two oldest children attend Northeast ISD Middle School and High School. I am here today in support of SB 784. In May 2016, Northeast ISD adopted a new middle school human sexuality curriculum. I have done over 100 hours of research into the curriculum and the process to adopt it. I have exhausted the district's grievance process and appeals to the TEA. In selecting this new curriculum, the new curriculum's ineffectiveness was ignored. The positive results of the previous curriculum were also ignored. SHAC members were falsely told that the district was experiencing high sixth grade pregnancy rates to incite them to support changing the curriculum. The difference between the old and new curriculum was grossly misrepresented to the SHAC, Board of Trustees, and parents. Details of the new curriculum were not viewed by the SHAC or Board of Trustees prior to voting. Only misleading lesson summaries were viewed, and they were provided by the entities with a financial incentive to offer the curriculum. Conservative-minded parents and organizations were ignored and bullied by the school district. For example, my pastor and I both received a certified letter from the district asking me not to speak at my church. Only 4 curriculums were reviewed by the SHAC. None of them met the requirements of the Texas Education Code or qualified for Texas Abstinence Education grants. Instead, federal funding was obtained for the curriculum and offered to Northeast ISD for free. The SHAC members do not properly represent the community. Members are hand-selected by Northeast ISD administration, not the board. Conservative-minded parents and community members are blocked from the SHAC. The Board of Trustees approves the list of SHAC members months after they have been selected and are already serving. SHAC meetings are now closed to the public. The date, time, and location is withheld, and SHAC meeting minutes, once were long 6 to 10 pages, are now half a page, providing no insight to parents. Parent acceptance of the new curriculum is claimed by the district, but their metric is flawed. As a parent, to view the curriculum, I had to drive to the district offices over 1 hour round trip during school hours. I could only view the curriculum under supervision, and I was not allowed to take pictures. Purchasing the curriculum cost $600. Parent information meetings and online access provide grossly misleading lesson summaries instead of the curriculum details. The district falsely claims otherwise. Therefore, I am in support of SB 784.
All right, you said several alarming things. You got a letter saying you couldn't speak where?
At my church.
And
And it's in your packet, actually. I've provided backup for every one of my statements. I am a very factual person. Although I can get emotional about this topic, my goal was to focus on facts from the very beginning. And so if you look at packet 3, which is the white packet, the second page is the letter I received from the district. And my pastor was copied.
Yeah, bear with me, I'm looking at the letter real quick. Is there a second page?
To the letter, No, that is the letter in its entirety. Well, actually, no,
It
you're
is
right,
in the middle
it's
of the
not.
sentence.
It should have copied on the back. I'm so sorry.
That's all right, so I just don't see where it says you shouldn't speak. They're trying to give you information that they don't agree with what you're saying, but
If you, I'll find that.
Yeah, if
I
you give that to
apologize,
the
I
meeting.
thought that was on the back of my copy.
And the second thing, the shacks are not required currently to be open meetings. Is that correct?
The sub makes it real clear, the sub is the Open Meetings Act, notice, publication.
I'm just required that,
That's right.
I'm just surprised that any public entity could have a sub-entity that doesn't have public hearings.
It's real, it's something that I'm glad we have a chance to fix it.
Yeah. Any other questions, members? Thank you for traveling here today.
Okay, great.
Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Sharon? Armkey? Arm? All right. Anyone else?
Yes, we have quite a few things.
Missy Cara, Carissa Lopez, Vilma Luna, and Vanessa McDougal. Vilma, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you very much, sir.
Missy, if you would, start us off.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Missy Cara, and I'm here in support of Senate Bill 784. I'm a registered nurse and a parent of 2 students in the Fort Worth Independent School District. Last spring, my youngest daughter participated in the sex ed curriculum chosen by our SHAC. HealthSmart, the curriculum, was developed by a publisher that has close ties to Planned Parenthood. It includes content that was not disclosed on our class consent form provided to parents. I've provided several documents you can follow along, and the first are on page 1 and 2, front and back. Many parents with children in this class attempted to get printed materials for home review. Unfortunately, we were met with strong resistance from district administrators who claimed that the curriculum was copyrighted and not to be taken off of school property. It's difficult for parents to reinforce personal views and beliefs at home without these public school materials. It actually felt as though our district intentionally avoided public input or support regarding this federally funded sex ed program, and I provided the number of this program for you. Since Fort Worth ISD withheld materials and specific content from us during this health unit, we could not fully appreciate conflicts in belief that would be tackled in the classroom. I believe Fort Worth ISD knowingly acted in violation of Texas Family Code, Chapter 151, that's provided on pages 3 through 5. Not only is Fort Worth ISD using HealthSmart to teach our kids about Planned Parenthood's version of sex ed, they now also refer students as young as age 12 for reproductive health services using a policy included on page 6 that will send students to providers, and that is listed on page 7 and 8, that notably include an abortion-providing Planned Parenthood facility without parental knowledge or consent. I've spoken with countless parents regarding these issues and can assure all of you that no matter what beliefs that they hold, political affiliation that they have, how they feel about curriculum content or providers, that they all have serious concerns about the implementation process of this sex ed curriculum and reproductive services referral process in Fort Worth Independent School District. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you. So real quick question, you say HealthSmart.
Yes, sir.
Has close ties to Planned Parenthood.
Yes, sir.
What are those close ties?
The publisher is ETR, which stands for Education, Training, and Research. And they separated from Planned Parenthood somewhere in 1979, 1980. Records to be found about this online are very difficult to obtain, but I do have connections that can put the two together. This is the education arm of Planned Parenthood.
Okay. Senator Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This really is a broader issue, just I think, but since it's been brought up here, We know that school districts have withheld information from parents back on C-scope days, and this isn't the first time we've heard about this. And I think that to have a situation where any public school can refuse a parent access to anything that's being taught in the class to any extent they ask for it needs to be stopped. We need to fix this, because this is taxpayer money being used to educate our children, and the education of our children is a primary responsibility of the parent. The parent can't have access to what the children are being taught, then there's something wrong with what we're doing. And so I hope we can fix that problem for this area, but I also hope we can address it across the board. So if a parent wants access to what their child is being exposed to in school, they get immediate access to it and not put through a bunch of hoops.
Yes, sir.
And Ms. Harmke, if you want to join the panel up here?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sorry I was late.
That's all right. You're right on time.
Okay.
Carissa?
Good morning. My name is Carissa Lopez, and I am the political director for the Texas Freedom Network. And I was here opposed to SB 784, but our main concern, our primary concern, was with the Education Commissioner having sole authority over the curriculum, and it sounds like that has been removed. So my testimony will be quite a bit shorter, and without having seen the committee sub, I can't say one way or another. But we do believe at TFN that sex ed is essential to students' health, relationships, and life goals. That's why we did several studies of in-depth examinations into the content of sex ed in Texas public schools. And in our 2017 report, we found that a number of school districts have decided to shift to sex ed policies that emphasize abstinence, but also include information on condoms and other forms of contraception and disease prevention. Some also teach students that everyone, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity, deserve to be treated with respect. And this year we have seen several districts update their sex ed curricula through an inclusive process that includes extensive public input. And current law, signed by Governor George W. Bush, gives local school districts authority to teach what to teach in sex ed classes as long as they emphasize abstinence. The law does not require abstinence-only instruction, nor does it bar districts from including information about sexual orientation and gender identity. Still, Texas has received more federal abstinence-only funding than any other state every year since 2004. However, more than 80% of school districts still teach abstinence-only or no sex ed at all. Yet, Texas has long had one of the nation's highest teen birth rates, fourth highest in 2016. State law does already require school districts to make the process for deciding sex ed policies transparent and the district's curriculum open to the public. Districts that choose to teach sex ed must provide parents a summary of the course content and make their curriculum available for review. Additionally, anyone in the school district has the right to petition the local elected school board to support or oppose to a sex ed curriculum. Finally, parents have the right to opt their children out of any sex ed. However, given the committee sub, having not seen it, I do want to say that our research does show that some districts don't implement SHACs consistently, and some do a good job, some don't have one at all. So we are supportive of efforts to make them more robust, but we do want to ensure that we're not putting more barriers in place for districts that want to teach comprehensive sex ed. So that would be our main concern, but I didn't have to read it.
So now that you've seen the substitute, and I think the main issue in the substitute was taking the commissioners, changing that.
That was our primary concern.
So what would you say your position is now?
I haven't read it yet.
So we're going to have you
I'm gonna read
on
it
the bill?
Potentially.
We don't have potentially.
I'm going to leave it for now, but I'm going to read it, and as soon as I read it, I'll be here and I can talk to the clerk and see if that's okay with you.
No,
it's not. I don't want to change my position yet, having not read it.
Okay, we'll just leave it as opposed.
Had we seen the committee sub, we may have just been neutral on it. So.
Thank you. Do we do Sharon? I'm sorry, let's do, Melanie, you go.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I'm very, some of y'all know I wear various hats, but I'm here today as a mother of two sons.
And introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm about to do that.
I know it's probably your first time up here.
It is my first time up here, and I was about to do that. I'm the proud mom, Vilma Luna, and I live in Austin, Texas, and I am for this committee substitute 784, the proud mom of two sons, and the youngest son of our two children has Down syndrome. So our experience, and I'm going to just kind of very briefly hit on it, was that our district brought in a third-party to conduct curriculum as part of, I think, a really important piece of curriculum for young students and all age students that have special needs that had to do with social relationships, boundaries, safety in the community, and so on. Part of that curriculum we knew going in was going to be addressing human sexuality, reproduction, and student health. And we were told that we would have an opportunity to review those units prior to those being given to the students. In fact, that did not happen. But I think once I kind of asked some questions about that, what I learned was that, in fact, this curriculum was not reviewed by our district SHAC. Initially, I was not allowed to get a copy or review the curriculum. Ultimately, I did. I was able to review the curriculum. And there was a lot of uncertainty as to whether this 2804 applies to students in special education and or students that are in transition services, including conversation I had with a high-level school administrator that was just unclear and uncertain whether that section of the education code applies to those students. So I think this bill will go a long way. I think this bill will absolutely provide an opportunity for parents who are especially I think parents that have children that have special needs, all parents are engaged with their kids' education, but parents that have children that are receiving special education services, I think are even more important partners with the schools. So this would, I hope, clarify that this applies to all students, regardless of whether they're under an IEP, regardless of whether they're part of the day in a high school and part of the day in transition services, but that it applies to all students. It's important content that all students need to receive, and we support this bill and our family.
Well, thank you. It's good to see a former colleague here
Yes,
as
sir.
well.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Hughes? You and Chairman Luna and I used to sit together on the floor of the House, as I remember, a few years ago.
We sure did.
Yeah.
Shall I tell them what the name of that section was called? We called it Red Square.
That was before we got
I know, y'all turned it into another color.
It was pretty red.
It was red.
Red, and it was neon red.
It's good to see you again.
Thank you.
Sharon?
Yes. Thank you. My name is Sharon Armkey from Dripping Springs, Texas. First, do no harm is one of my big points, and also trust but verify. That's the second one. By the way, I did want to mention the birth rates. I've seen those charts. Most of the birth rates, like the huge majority, are 18 to 19-year-old Hispanic young women, and it's not listed whether or not they are married. So again, always look at data with open eyes to make sure you're realizing what you're actually seeing. And by the way, Texas Freedom Network, as you all know probably, is associated with Planned Parenthood, was started by Cecile Richards, who was the director of Planned Parenthood for many years. And now, just let me tell you, the Human Rights Campaign has targeted Texas. They've opened 4 offices across Texas. Their affiliate, Planned Parenthood, states that children have sexual rights. Children. Explaining why they oppose age of consent laws designed to protect children. Their work is based on the debunked work of Dr. Alfred Kinsey. The easiest path to our children to indoctrinate them is through our schools, our public schools. With this in mind, I would urge you to consider possibly tightening up this bill a little bit so that the commissioner named in this bill will also be asked to verify that the sex ed programs uphold all Texas laws. This is easy to verify with a program such as Scott White, which the parents in Dripping Springs recently voted large majority, 70% was what I heard, but also 80% in favor of Scott White. I don't know which is right. I would suggest that this commissioner possibly be under the Attorney General's office rather than the Texas Administration, TEA, because here's the problem we've found. The age of consent in Texas is not extremely clear. The age of consent in Texas is 17. Am I done?
Yeah, can you wrap it up pretty quick?
That's it?
We'll give you a few more seconds. Wrap it up.
I would like to say I made this chart of all the wrong Texas things, that big decisions. And again, I didn't give you the chart. It was too many pages. But I'm just saying, this is the kind of stuff. Our commissioner shouldn't just look and say, did you meet the dates? He should say, did you uphold Texas law? Or did you teach little kids the things that if I read them out loud to you right now, I would be called vulgar. So if it's vulgar to adults, why do we do it to little children in mixed sex classes? There's a reason. They want to break down modesty. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'm welcome for questions if you have any.
Any questions? Thank you. Thank you, panel. Thank you
All
for
right,
being
thank
here.
you.
We have one more. Oh. Vanessa McDougal, are you here? Okay, let's get some more. Paula Moore, Ann Newman, and Janet Riolini.
Mr. Chairman, is Ms. Delgado coming back? She come on the road?
That's what I'm looking for.
Oh, there she is. Okay, good. There you are. Okay, thank you.
And David Wiley. You're all here. You're here, you're here. Bob Hall's here. He was here. Yes, and we have some voting after session. Yes, even you. All right, Paula?
Good morning. My name is Paula Moore, and I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, and a longtime teacher. I'm also a member of CWA. I'm their issues coordinator. This morning, I'm going to bring some examples to you that are pretty close to home. If only parents knew, I would entitle these examples. One of them is from a friend of mine named Ann, whose daughter had given permission to her, not this Ann, whose daughter had given permission to her daughter, Ann's granddaughter, to take the sex ed offered to her at a middle school in San Antonio. I told Ann that the sex ed may as well be porn and she should warn her daughter. The daughter obviously had not seen any of the curriculum and didn't change her permission. Later on, during the course, Ann's daughter told her mom one thing: please tell Paula that she was right about everything she said about the sex ed being harmful and being similar to porn. Next one, I have another friend named Linda, and whose daughter opted her daughter, Linda's granddaughter, out of the sex ed curriculum in her middle school in San Antonio, Texas. Later on, Linda emailed me forwarding an invite about a brief parent-based intervention to prevent / reduce adolescent sexual risk behaviors for parents with adolescents ages 10 to 14. From guess where? The same school district her daughter was enrolled in San Antonio, the same one that they had opted her out of the sex ed. This so-called intervention the district was pushing was families talking together, described as face-to-face parent session. May I have a couple of more seconds?
Yes, ma'am.
This families talking together is warm and welcoming. It is a Planned Parenthood program published by Planned Parenthood's publishing arm, as earlier talked about ETR.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're
and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Members, any questions? All right. Thank you. Ann?
Mr. Chairman,
Sir Campbell?
Paula is from my district. Thank you so much for coming up, friend of mine. Thank you so much, and as well as Ann here.
Thank you.
And I'm going to have to go to another committee, so if you'll excuse me in just a minute. Thank
For
you.
those in the audience, we have a lot of committees going at the same time, so you'll see members moving in and out. All right, Ann, if you would give us your testimony.
I'm Ann Newman. I'm for Senate Bill 784. I'm a co-author of Healthy Sex Education in Your Schools, which was published by Focus on the Family. I'm a grandparent. I have 5 grandchildren, and this has been going on since my children were in school. The United States Supreme Court has upheld parental rights for about a century. The Texas Family Code says that parents have the right to direct the moral and religious training of their children, and that a state agency may not adopt rules or policies or take any other action that violates the fundamental right and duty of a parent to direct the upbringing of their children. The Texas Education Code views parents as, quote, full partners with educators in the education of their children. The code states that parents are partners with educators, administrators, and school boards in the children's education, and that parents should be encouraged to actively participate in creating and implementing programs. A common issue that you've heard about is that parents find out what their children are learning when their children come home and tell them. School districts are violating the law by not giving parents an opportunity to opt out. Chapter 26 of the Education Code gives the parents the right to view curriculum and to opt out their children, and that's been in place since about 1995. I worked on that legislation. This bill is about transparency and accountability. If schools have nothing to hide, then why do they keep parents in the dark? Another issue that is sex education is infused in non-health classes, thereby circumventing the law and parental rights. I believe that no one who opposes Chapter 2804 and opposes the standard of waiting till marriage to have sex should be on the SHAC committee, and I'd ask that you include that. The Education Code mandates a standard that will protect students' lives, health, and future. That is, wait until marriage to have sex.
All right, thank you. Thank you for being here, Ann.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions? All right, Janet, you're back.
I'm back. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. I'm very glad to see that the approval by the Education Commissioner is no longer in the bill. I think that's wise at this time. I'm a family physician. My name is Janet Riolini, and I am the founder of Healthy Futures of Texas, which is a nonprofit dedicated to reducing teen and unplanned pregnancy in Texas. We're all about adolescent and family health, and parents, we feel, are the most important in the education of their children. I have to say that what we try to do with the curriculum that we disseminate and that other curricula that we help schools and other agencies to offer children is all about giving kids what their parents want for them.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think we need to acknowledge that there's controversy, and sometimes a few parents are unhappy with what the majority of parents have wanted for their kids. So I think that happens in school districts, and it's difficult for superintendents and for the school staff and for the parents involved as well. I think the SHAC often in the schools that we work with or low resource schools have difficulty recruiting parents because they're busy, they're poor, they're trying to work 2 or 3 jobs, they have many children to take care of. So it's very difficult, and I think we need to acknowledge that. It's not trying to hide things from parents. It's how do we get parents to the meetings. It's a struggle. The main thing that I want to talk about is the intellectual property issues. I am an author of a curriculum, and I think that for people to be able to see it is very important. On the other hand, for us to have it given away and not under the control of the publisher or the disseminator is very difficult. And I don't know yet how to manage that with an online edition or emailing a PDF or mailing a book. I think is something I can understand. It's a little expensive for the district. But I think that needs to be worked out so that it's affordable for school districts to do, and so that it protects the rights, the copyright, and there's no legal problems that the school district gets into. But I'm in favor of transparency, but I can't support this bill at this time. Thank you.
Hughes, you have a question?
Thank you. Dr. Riolini, thanks you. And I apologize, I was calling you Ms. Delgado because I was looking at the name from your organization. I apologize.
Ms. Delgado is my boss.
I understand. Well, tell her hello for me. And I was,
Thank you.
And thank you for your testimony of what you do. We're listening, and we know where you're coming from, and we want to get this right.
Okay.
So thank you. Thank you.
And if I might just make a point too, that the chart that a previous testifier lifted up is from the curriculum that I wrote. I'm not affiliated with Planned Parenthood, and nor is Healthy Futures of Texas, but it's about health for children. And I have to tell you that those are things, those are words and things that the children in 7th grade, even 6th grade, but 7th to 12th grade are able to see online, and it's really a wash in their world, in their electronic world. And what we try to do is help make a healthy framework that these are things that some people do and why you might want to avoid them, what the risks are, so that they have a healthy framework of decision making so they can make their own decision to be as healthy as they can be.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, referring to your chart,
Yes.
what age group was this, were you
The
thinking of? when you did
curriculum
this?
is ideally for 8th to 9th graders, but the teachers and the folks who work in schools have always wanted us to go younger, 7th grade. I don't recommend our curriculum going younger than 7th grade. I think 6th grade is a little too young. But even 6th graders are being exposed to a lot of things, and a few 6th graders are already sexually active.
Thank you. Thank you. David?
Thank you, Senator Taylor and members of the committee. My name is David Wiley. I am a Represent Texas campaign to prevent teen pregnancy, as well as myself. I was a 30-year faculty member at Texas State University in health education, and have done a lot of research into sex education in Texas public schools. I'm also a former school board trustee as well, so I come at this from many different angles. My testimony when I walked in today has changed since I've heard what some of the people have said. I have not seen the substitute language. The Texas campaign contacted Senator Hughes' office last night, and we didn't connect. So I'm not 100% sure what the substitute language is. I've gleaned some of it by listening to the conversation. It seems to me that what really is going on here is a problem with shacks, not necessarily sex ed. There's a number of districts that have really good shacks that are good models for what's going on. And in reality, some of the stories that you've heard today seem to be individual problems in individual school districts that is not system-wide or systemic in Texas. One of the previous ladies who testified from her school district, which is the Northeast ISD, they actually require opt-in for their sex ed program, and they have had a 95% opt-in since they required parents to actually give active consent for their students to receive sex ed. If the committee really wants to do something that's positive here, you need to increase the accountability by school districts on the PEAMS report for SHAC meetings. Because right now there are no regulations as to how many committee members you have, how long the terms are, how you vote, how you organize subcommittees, how you have agenda items. None of that stuff is listed anywhere in the Texas Education Code. But I will tell you, if this is being used to restrict access to sex education in Texas, I want to strongly oppose this bill, primarily because we lead the nation in repeat births among teens. We're always in the top 4 or 5 among states in teen births, and it has a huge impact on Medicaid rates, all this kind of stuff that has a fiscal note to the state. So again, I think this is more about shacks and trying to tighten up those regulations, and hopefully less about trying to restrict access to evidence-based sex education programs.
Senator Hughes.
Thanks for your testimony,
Yes, sir.
and you're right. The changes in the committee substitute deal with a lot of what you were concerned about, and thank you for working with us. I do want to talk in particular about the testimony, the sworn testimony we heard from the parent with the student at Northeast ISD. Now, you told us what their policy is and that they have a high acceptance rate or buy-in rate from parents, opt-in rate. Now, you're not disputing what Ms. Luna said about what her experience was, right?
I
You're
do not know what her
disputing-
experience is.
But
Right.
she told us.
Right.
You're not saying
Of course not.
she's not saying anything. Let me back up.
Okay.
She told us what her experience was.
Yes.
I was told I'd be shown the material. I was not. She told us about specific interactions where I understand what you're saying, what the written policy is. She told us how it was applied to her. You don't dispute anything she said, do you?
I have no reason to dispute anything anyone reports on a personal story.
I
I
don't
will
think
note
so.
that there's 65,000 students in that school district. And if this was a systemic problem, there would be probably more than 1 or 2 people that were up here complaining.
So then, so then we still need rules in place.
Oh, no doubt.
We need transparency.
Yes.
Open Meetings Act, notice, things like that. Wouldn't that be helpful?
Probably. I think, yes, on the surface, I agree. The issue is I think there's this subtext that the district is trying to hide something. In my work with schools for the last 40 years is exactly the opposite. They do everything they can to be open, and if you have a bad interaction with one employee, it doesn't stay in the entire process or the entire school district. But I think, and again, nobody's trying to hide anything. I think transparency is very important, and if she had a negative interaction with the school district, to me, that's not a state of Texas issue. That's for her to address locally.
And so if we can put rules in place and guidelines in place that prevent those kind of negative interactions, shouldn't we be trying to do that?
Oh, I agree, and I think there are rules already in place in terms of parents being able to review any curriculum, not just health ed, sex ed, math, science, whatever. And again, I'm not sitting in a room with these people, but I know that when I was a public school teacher and a parent wanted to review the curriculum, we had someone in a room to answer questions. They weren't monitoring the parent or stalking the parent. They were there to be a resource should there be questions. So I guess it all depends on your interpretation of why people are in the room.
I believe you did it that way, and I'm glad. It's obviously not that way everywhere. But thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? All right. Senator Hall, you have a question?
Are we done with witnesses?
We have one more. Yeah. Thank you, panel. Oh, I'm sorry. You need to give us your position on the bill.
Oppose.
Oppose. Thank you. Next up, we have Jennifer Fleck, Nicole Hudgens, Suzanne Kearns, and Cecilia Wood. Jennifer?
Yes.
Yeah, if you would introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you. My name is Jennifer Fleck. I'm a parent and an attorney, and I am for SB 784. Thank you for this bill. I know that many hours of careful review have contributed to the comprehensive redress of transparency in Texas Education Code 28.004. In 2012, a sex ed curriculum was adopted in many Houston districts called It's Your Game. Most districts provided a basic summary parent notification as required by the law. However, where I live, Cy-Fair ISD provided a detailed parent notification that provided a link to online access. This detailed notification and online access was the catalyst for parent involvement, and we were able to influence the removal and replacement of a better program. SB 784 would change the law so that parents in every district would have the same transparency and access. In 2016, I represented a middle school parent who testified earlier, Melissa Beckett, in regards to her concerns. Unfortunately, the laws and rights, the district betrayed her laws and rights. And Melissa filed a grievance process and was not provided a fair and impartial process. In fact, these same taxpayer-funded Northeast ISD employees led a breakout session yesterday at the Texas Campaign to Prevent Teen Pregnancy, where they compared their success and ease like shooting fish in a barrel, while they coached others on how to use their same tactics in other districts. Senate Bill 784 would change the law, affording every parent a neutral appeals process. In both Cy-Fair ISD and Northeast ISD, the administration made changes to curriculum without public comment or real parent input. Current law requires that the curriculum reflect local community values. Unfortunately, the district administration has defined local community value as their preference. SB 784 would require this process to be brought out into the open and allow for greater input and unbiased selection. My hope is that the multiple provisions of Senate Bill 784 will address a systemic problem in our school districts to provide transparency and an opportunity for curriculum that reflects local community values and Texas law. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Members, any questions? All right, Nicole, if you would introduce yourself for the record.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. My name is Nicole Hudgens, and I'm the Senior Policy Analyst for Texas Values, We're the largest statewide organization focusing on faith, family, and freedom with over 100,000 supporters in all 254 counties of the state. And we are testifying in favor of SB 784 and greatly appreciate the committee sub that you've brought, Senator Hughes. I believe this addresses a number of issues that our organization has been contacted over. We've had parents contact our office asking for help because unfortunately when it came to the discussions of the sex ed curriculum, school districts were not being transparent. In fact, I've been in meetings in Austin ISD where parents on both sides of the political aisle were outraged because they were not a part of the process of discussing important issues with their students, some issues that could be very sensitive in nature, and they wanted to have a say, but unfortunately their school district did not allow them to be part of the process. We've also seen where in Fort Worth ISD, I believe it was last year, when parents in Fort Worth were not allowed to see their children's sex ed curriculum, and children were forbidden from taking the curriculum home so that their parents could see it, and it took a letter from the Attorney General's office to go to the Fort Worth Independent School District to remind them strongly that parents are supposed to have access to this curriculum, and it took that letter that finally allowed parents to have access to see what their students had been learning. And so it's time for there to be strong transparency, very clear transparency, so that parents can be a part of this very important process of their child's development. And so with that, I urge this committee to support SB 784. Thank you.
Thank you, members. All right, Suzanne?
Hello. My name is Suzanne Kearns. I'm the mother of 2 AISD students, and I also run an organization called the Informed Parents of Austin. And we have over 1,000 members who are supportive of inclusive and comprehensive sex education. I've been hearing a lot of things about transparency in the testimonies today, and I just want to say I've attended every SHAC meeting in the past 2 years, and in regards to the AISD new sex ed curriculum, the district had 3 community-wide input sessions last fall, and they also had a district-wide survey which over 5,000 parents were able to give their feedback on every single one of the sex education national standards. And so I don't understand why there's no transparency. Obviously, I am against SB 784. And I'm a supporter of comprehensive sex ed because there is a baby born to a teen mom in Travis County every 10 hours. Texas is number 4 in teen birth rate, and I think it's shameful that we're not educating our kids on the basic information to keep them healthy and safe. But whether I like sex ed or not, this bill is unnecessary and likely unenforceable. Requiring districts to distribute copyrighted materials is likely illegal. I mean, these curriculum, you wouldn't be able to make copies of a math textbook and send that home to parents. And the law as it stands already requires that schools have the curriculum available in the library for parents to check out at any time. These lessons are usually not even taught until May, so the parents have the entire year to go into their school's library, where I'm assuming they are there at least once a year, to go check out the curriculum for themselves. So, like I said, the transparency measures are already in place, so I really think the Commission should spend more time and effort in enforcing the current laws and supporting their SHACs instead of creating new laws that violate copyright laws and curriculum providers. And back up to that survey that over 5,000 AISD parents took, for each of the national sex education standards, more than 90% of parents supported that kids learn those between the grades 3 through 5. And it was even higher for the middle school. So a law like this basically overrides the will of the parents and the educators in the individual districts.
Having transparency overrides the will of the parents, I'm sorry?
Transparency is already in the law. It's already required that the schools have the curriculum and the lesson available at each of the libraries. So if they're not doing that, that's definitely something that the commissioner should be following up with and making sure that's available for parents. But there's no necessity to make copies of it, violate copyright laws, when the parents could just go into the library. They're there for school parties and pickups, you know, all throughout the year. They could pop into the library and take a look at those lessons just as easily if it was emailed to them.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Fallon?
Yeah, could you just specifically tell me how Senate Bill 784 overrides the will of the parents? Specifically.
Well, so basically, I know that there was the substitute language. So if there was going to be one person who was in charge of making decisions that would override that, that's definitely a concern. But I also think, for example, in AISD, we just spent 2 years of having professionals within the district, professionals within the sex education space come and put together a scope and sequence that then the board voted unanimously on. And like I said, 5,000 parents took that survey, and over 90% of them supported each and every one of the national sex education
that's
standards.
Fine, but that's you to answer my question. What
Okay, so what I specifically have a problem with this is if a curriculum provider says, no, the curriculum that you are using in AISD, it is illegal, you cannot distribute it, then that means that we can't have sex ed, which AISD has just determined.
You don't think they can have another provider? Is this a monopoly where only one person
I don't
writes
think
this
that
kind
we
of
should
curriculum?
choose a provider based on who's willing to let their stuff go out in mass distribution. In fact, I would argue that any provider that would be willing to just give away their curriculum may not be the best fit. So that is my concern. And the district is putting so much, they just had the RFP go out a couple months ago. They are working tirelessly to evaluate all those providers and make sure that they match each one of the elements of this scope and sequence that was put
All right,
together.
thank you. That's fine. Thank you.
Senator Hall?
So you think the only people to be qualified to teach a sex education course has to be hired outside the school system? There used to be a time when curriculum for classes were created by teachers in the system. And one of the other
Could I just comment on that real quick?
Yes, please do.
So basically, we're talking about a health curriculum. Are the teachers putting together the information about biology and how photosynthesis happens? Are the teachers putting that curriculum together, or are they buying those textbooks from professionals who have put that together, which is exactly what they're doing with the sex education? They're not having outsiders come in and teach it. They are getting the lessons and making those available for the teachers.
Well, I'll go to my next one. Do you understand the cause and effect role? Because you mentioned the teenagers, the rapid growth in pregnancy of teenagers. We have heard testimony in other settings other than this from people who worked in the abortion industry, who created the initial sex education courses for the purpose of increasing their supply line of young women for abortions. And so we know that there were sex education by the experts that were created to do this. And that is when we saw the increase in teen pregnancies going up when these courses were first introduced. And so that's the professionals in it. And sex isn't something like you spend years learning microbiology about. It's something that most people have a fairly common understanding of.
And I think just because I am very familiar with the scope and the sequence for each of the grades, I would say that probably we are really over-sexualizing the term sex education. So much of the information that is included, especially at the lower grade levels, are just basic. You deserve respect, and you should require consent of anyone, from pulling your hair to texting you when you don't want to be texted by them. These are very basic things, and there is the fact that kids are going to be learning the names of their body parts, but I think that's incredibly important since 20% of little girls will be sexually abused by the time they're 18, and most of those happen between ages 3 and 8. We do not get to decide when our kids need to be able to decline consent or to know the names of their body parts and that they should not be touched. And this has been part of my inner circle of friends recently, and it's not something that you can just say. Something that I've heard in some of these community input sessions are just teach it to the school districts that need it. And this is not something that you can do by zip code or by area.
I think you've dodged the question enough. Thank you.
Senator West.
Excuse me. I think that's pretty disrespectful. How did I dodge the question? Because you think that Planned Parenthood is trying to get kids pregnant so that they can provide abortion?
Excuse me, ma'am. Senator Hall, you're not saying this is an abortion bill, are you?
No.
Okay.
No,
you made reference to. Let me finish my question. You made reference to abortion providers developing the curriculum, and that's an issue that you have. That's an issue you raised. Are we saying that this is pro-abortion or something, or teaching our children, making sure there's a sex education curriculum in place for all of our children that's reflective of what a local community want their children to learn? I mean, what are we saying?
Sir Hall.
The question was on what we're teaching. No, this is a very good bill. This is not an abortion. This is a very good bill to get parents involved in. I am very happy that Senator Hughes has brought this bill forward, because we've heard testimony here about schools introducing sex education courses and cutting parents out of it, not letting them participate in it. And so I want to make sure that the transparency that was talked about, that parents are responsible for the education of the children. There's no aspect of education, whether it's history, math, or sex, that parents should not have full access to. And we had testimony earlier from people in school districts that were not allowed to see the material being taught to their students.
And I agree that's something that the commissioner should be looking at.
Ma'am. Let me get this back on the bill that we're discussing today, members. The bill we have before us is about transparency. And you've raised some issues in your district. They've had a lot of transparency. I picked up on that. But unfortunately, what we see a lot in public ed is we're dealing with 1,000+ districts, and not all of them are doing what Austin did. So that's kind of what the point of this bill is. So if we just get back members on this bill, we've got session at 11.
Okay.
And so let's
that's fine. I just wanted to make sure I clarified that. And I think what Senator Hughes does on page 1, it says at least 5 members must be appointed by the school, by each member of the school board. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. And you did raise one question I think is worth considering, the posting online on copyright laws. Right. So we probably do need to look into that so we don't get in trouble on that part. I think that's worth looking at, Senator Hughes.
It is, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hughes.
It is. And obviously this is about access to parents. That can be a password protected that only the parents can have access to. They have to click I agree not to share, disseminate. It's not uncommon at all in the digital age in which we live. And my goodness, even going back a generation ago, textbooks were brought home, they were seen, we were told don't copy this, don't distribute this. This bill says it's shown to parents. Parents can be placed under legal obligation not to share it beyond that. The copyright stuff is not, it's not a big, that can be dealt with. We're talking about parents seeing the curriculum, which Texas law already requires. This is just a question of the way in which they're shown the curriculum. A parent could just as easily look at the material in the library and then go and share what they saw. I mean, the format in which it is shared is not what's important. It's that the parents have access. Of course, the TEA can put rules in place that say parents have to promise not to share. That's easy. Copyright solved. That's easy. And if this is a requirement statewide, every provider will have to meet this. And we know what a big customer Texas is. The market responds to these things very quickly, very easily.
All right.
That's the paper tiger.
Thank you. Is there any more questions for this panel? Thank you, panel. Appreciate you being here.
Mr. Chairman, my apologies for the second page being missed.
Oh, okay.
Both pages are here.
Thank you. Cecilia Wood. And Monica Klein.
Thank you.
Carol Frederick.
Refrain from making such an offended claim of any further publications or presentations.
That's pretty strong. Cecilia?
I'm Cecilia.
Yeah, if you would introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you. My name is Cecilia Wood. I'm here testifying on behalf of myself,
and I am in favor of the bill. I am board certified in family law, so I deal with lots of parental rights issues. I'm also a mother and a grandmother and a great-grandmother, and I have another one on the way this month, great-grandchild, and I have several family members who are teachers. And so what I have learned over the years, both through my personal and my professional experience, is that I've rarely met a teacher or dealt with a teacher either through a case or on my own or in my family that does not want more parental involvement. And the issues that we're talking about here are so sensitive that even if a parent were to choose to allow their child to participate in this kind of a program, they would want to know what was being taught. They would want, this is something you would want to talk about in your home with your child, and know perhaps why all of a sudden there's new behavior that's going on. Sometimes children learn things, they act it out, and the next thing you know, you might have a CPS involvement. So the whole, whoever's involved with this, the parents, the teachers, the administration, everyone needs to know what's going on. I would say that given the number of latchkey children, I would prefer to see it all posted online where parents could access, like they do records, by a password, because a lot of children will get their hands on this information and the parents may never see it. But I'm definitely in favor of this bill, and I think it protects everyone in the system. Thank you.
All right, thank you, members. Any questions? Monica?
Yes, and I also have something to hand out. My name is Monica Klein, and I'm a former comprehensive sex educator. I was a sex educator in comprehensive sex education for over 10 years. I started as an HIV prevention educator. Then I was trained by Planned Parenthood to reach out to teenagers and teach them sex education. And then I ended my career as a Title X training manager for Texas and New Mexico. And I have, for the last 10 years, been a sexual risk avoidance instructor. And so I'm here in support of SB 784. I am supporting this bill because in my 10 years of having been in comprehensive sex education, the message I receive from comprehensive sex educators is that parents are a barrier to service. They do not want parents involved because they know that once parents involved, parents will naturally protect their children. I think it's really important that the transparency happens in the shacks for two reasons. Because they need to understand the health model behind comprehensive sex education and the health model behind sexual risk avoidance. Comprehensive sex education is a secondary health model. It does not eliminate any risks whatsoever. It only promises to reduce risks. Condoms can only reduce the risk for most STDs up to 50% if you're actually looking at true research, and not what the curriculums of comprehensive sex say, which is that they are effective. That is not data, that is just making a statement. It's important that parents know the difference between these because sexual risk avoidance is actually a primary health model that also, in the research by Brookings Institute, and I've attached that for you to read over as well, it actually helps avoid poverty. So if children were to do three things, which is to graduate from high school, delay sexual debut until adulthood, preferably around age 21 and preferably in marriage, and delay having children until that age, and having a full-time job, they have a 2% chance of ever living in poverty. So sexual risk avoidance is actually something that will help, which is the optimal health of our children mentally, physically, spiritually, and financially.
Yeah, thank you. And I have read that or seen that study before on the 3 factors that can go a long way to keep people out of poverty. I think the schools ought to be pushing more of that. Graduate high school, get a full-time job, and refrain from having kids until you're
Mr. Chairman, I'd love to see that site.
It's Brookings.
It is in the paperwork that I just gave to you as well.
Okay. Fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Senator Watson, do you have a question? Or you just want to? Yeah. Because I have seen that before, and we talk about getting kids, particularly low income, they're stuck in that circle of poverty. One of the best things we do is be stressing for early on. Finish high school.
I believe sexual risk avoidance is a message of hope that can bring anyone who is living in poverty out of poverty. It is an optimal primary health model to use that. And I believe that parents should have the right to have access to that research and information at SHACs and elsewhere.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is it Carol or Carol?
Carol.
Carol, thank you. I'm sorry.
Thank you. My name's Carol Fedrick, and I'm here to testify in favor of Senate Bill 784. Thank you, Senator Hughes, for this bill. I want to clear up a couple of things that I've heard say here. The parental survey that you heard about that AISD did, that had 5,000 responses, there were no options on that survey for parents to choose. No age was acceptable to teach some of those subjects. They left that out. They have not, I'm getting off track here, sorry. The SBOE, as far as copyright, in our meeting with Donna Bahorek, the chair of the SBOE, she said that TEA has no problems posting copyrighted material for their textbook reviews. So the copyright is not an issue. It should not be an issue. It's a red herring. And that, I'm sorry, I'm just getting started, that districts don't try to hide anything. My handouts will indicate otherwise. They are the parental notifications and scope and sequence documents for grades 6 through 8 for 2018 and 19 for you to compare. They're from AISD. The differences between what parents were told their children would be taught and what students are taught is staggering. The same letter was sent to parents of 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, leading to them to believe that all 3 grades would be taught the same innocuous subjects. They are not. STDs, HIV, and AIDS are the subjects of multiple lessons taught in 7th and 8th grades and not even mentioned on the notification letter. Contraception is taught in 8th grade, and it's not mentioned either. Parents were told their children would be taught the basics of male and female reproductive systems. However, the material are explicit and graphic, including descriptions and class discussions with 6th graders, that's 11-year-olds, on whether anal and oral sex should be considered abstinence. Instead of teaching about male and female reproductive systems, AISD actually teaches about people with the penis, people with the vagina, reproductive systems number 1 and reproductive systems number 2. I'm sorry, it just really upsets me what they're doing to our children. And all of these disparities are justified under the current language of summary of basic content. SB 784 is desperately needed to help parents protect their children from the new versions of explicit, graphic, comprehensive, inclusive sex ed, and strengthen their right to direct their children's educations based on full disclosure. I ask you to vote in favor of this bill.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank
Fedrick. Members, any questions? Senator Betancourt.
I want to thank you all for coming. I know it's an emotional issue, but I think Senator Hughes is on, with the bill, is on the right track, because I think it's time for everybody to know what's being taught and be able to clearly understand it, and also to make sure that it has the priorities that we think we should have in the state of Texas. So I want to thank you all for coming.
Can I make one more point before I leave?
Very quickly.
Quickly. Just that the SBOE, TEA, no one has any idea what sex ed curriculums are being taught in any of the districts in Texas.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to testify on, for, or against Senate Bill 784? Chair sees none, will close public testimony at this time. Senator Hughes,
Senator Hughes, I thank you so much. This bill is absolutely needed. I think the testimony we've heard in other settings and here today confirms that. And I would like to work with you to make sure that we tighten it up to take into consideration some of these things, like if a curriculum is going to be developed and be taught, that there's full, whatever they do, there's full access for parents without having to go to a hassle, because not everybody can take the time and go down to the library and find it. They should be able to have access on the internet or somehow so they get participate in it. And I also think that we need to limit who gets involved in creating these courses, because I think abortion providers have an ulterior motive in how these courses are put together and what these students are being taught. We know that from what we've heard from people who used to work for them and then changed what they did, that was their purpose. So I think we should have a limit on who could actually develop the courses. And in this. And so I'd love to work with you on, see if we can fit this in.
Thank you.
Sir Powell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Hughes, thank you for bringing this up. Listen, let's talk about the realities here. We are in an internet and digital age, and I have a 12-year-old son, and they're entering puberty, and I see and talk to his friends' parents who are friends of mine, and there's a lot of dangerous things out there in the internet for young minds. So I think sex education it's more important to have it now than it ever has been. Because when we got it, there wasn't an internet. There was, you learned from either your parents or the school or the older kids up the street. And now it's everywhere. So this is very important. And I looked at the bill, and honestly, Brian, with a little bit of cautious skepticism at first. And then as I read the bill, and particularly the sub, I think it's an eminently reasonable and thoroughly well thought out. The copyright issue, I think I have to be honest, and I kind of take it as a bit of a dodge, because there's plenty of providers that will certainly agree before, and because Texas is such a big customer, to a procedure where parents can access it with, as you said, password protected and agree not to share. There's plenty of artists that make millions of dollars selling music and audiobooks and things like that with that same agreement. If we violate that, then we're committing serious crimes, or we can get in trouble. So we definitely want to create or protect copyright stuff. But basic sex education, it's not as if it's space-age secrets. Let's be real honest about it. Sex ed probably hadn't changed, and you could teach it in Mesopotamia 5,000 years ago. It's going to be real similar to the way it is today in Texas in 2019. Let's be real honest about it. You don't need super duper experts and PhDs to be teaching this stuff. But thank you. I think it's a really reasonable bill. I was actually shocked that 9 people testified against. I was, it's perplexing to me, but thanks, Brian.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman.
Sir West?
Thank you, sir.
I do also believe that parents should have a right to know what the content is of these types of programs. I also believe that everyone, regardless of their perspective, whether they're Planned Parenthood or whatever, whether they believe that there should not be sex before marriage, which obviously I believe also should have input into this process, and that we have to have transparency, and that parents have a right to know what's going on. And the whole individuals are responsible for adopting this curriculum. I hold them accountable.
Yes, sir.
And so I agree with you as it relates to making certain that school board members appoint individuals that will be serving on this advisory committee, school health advisory council. In the absence, if they should not delegate this responsibility to the staff, and we need to make sure that's absolutely clear.
That's right.
It's their responsibility.
That's right.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Hughes. Briefly close. Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I thank each witness and each member and those who participated. And so many important matters have been discussed today. And here's what the bill does. Require the school boards clearly to appoint, not just to delegate that, as you said, Senator West. It requires those health advisory councils to take minutes of their meetings and to post those minutes on the website. And then it says the district has to adopt a policy for adopting this curriculum. And the School Health Advisory Council has to have at least 2 public meetings where the curriculum is discussed, and the recommendations of the school board have to be made in a public meeting. It sounds pretty transparent to me. We also require school districts to follow the same similar procedures to the State Board of Education follows when they adopt curriculum. Free from factual errors, suitable for the grade level, and reviewed by academic experts. Again, this is all about a process. It's open and transparent. It also says that school districts have to tell parents the dates these lessons will be offered so the parents can exercise their already existing rights to remove their children from those particular dates if they see fit.
Or prepare their child.
Or prepare their child for it. Senator, that's exactly right. Everything in this bill is to give effect to what's been the law since the 1990s or before, because we've learned it's just not having effect. And then, of course, we want to make these meetings of the School Health Advisory Council subject to the Open Meetings Law and public information. That's not too much to ask, and I think it's been well expressed. Everybody agrees, at least in principle, even the folks against the bill agree that parents ought to be able to see the curriculum. The question is in what means. Doing it online with a password-protected, copyright-protected system makes sense. In this day and age, it seems kind of silly to oppose that. Whatever it's disseminated to parents, they'd have to agree not to share it. It's about parents having access, not just to vague summaries, but to the actual material. I got it. I close. Thank you.
Thank you.
I had a few more minutes, but I'm done. Thank you. That's right. That's right. I can do that, too. I can do that. That's right.
At this time, we'll leave Senate Bill 784 pending, subject to call the chair. This time, the chair